Hi, my name is Michael Akimamiro. Welcome back to this channel. So, in our previous classes, we talked about authorization, authentication, and we talked about vulnerabilities and threats and how you differentiate those. And one of the things that I want you guys to pay attention to is why do organizations do this? Well, the reason why organizations mostly, have to comply with security requirements is because of one, regulation, two, business continuity, and three, to be able to protect the most important asset that organizations have, which is data, which is the data of their clients. It could be data of their employees, data of their business. What do we call it now? When trade secrets that they have, certain information that is peculiar to them, and they want to make sure that those informations are kept away from unauthorized users. So today we will be talking about another very exciting topic, which is how do we now conduct a risk analysis. We've talked about all these components. We talk about authorization, how you authorize users into your environment. We talk about, authentication, how you authenticate who is even coming in, then authorization, what they can do. We talk about role-based authorization. Now we are going into, and then we look at vulnerabilities and threat. Now we are going to put it together. How do you conduct risk assessment? But the first thing I want you guys to understand is that apart from all the fancy ways of, protecting your systems, there is a minimum requirement that organizations are supposed to have. It's like a minimum standard that organizations are supposed to have. You at least must fall within that, within that bucket, within that group. So you must have in the least sense of it, be able to have what we call your system hardening. You have to be able to harden your system in a way that you limit vulnerabilities that are within your system. One of the ways to do that is by making sure that you configure a very good password policy. That way, you know who you are authenticating in your environment, you know who is coming in, you know what your systems are connected to, and then there is a way to identify which system is connecting to which system. And then those authorizations are also protected. So you can use what we call a very good password protection policy, and the password could be something you have, something you are, something you know, to make sure that the system recognizes you and as the authorized user. And also the system can use that information to take out unauthorized users from having access to your system. The second thing is very, very important. We've talked about it, is your access control. So most of the time, the best practice is for you to have what we call role-based access control, so that your employees or whoever is within your organization, they will only have access to what they need to do their job and nothing more. So by making sure you assign users to a group, and then they inherit roles within that group, that is a very safe way of making sure you configure who has access to what, and then you have a very good understanding of what they have access to within your environment. That is very, very important. Then the next thing you need to do is, whenever you are onboarding any application, maybe a new system from a third-party vendor, wherever it's coming from, you want to make sure that you are removing what we call default access, all these default controls, default settings that was configured, by the maybe application owner, by the vendor. You want to remove all those default settings, and then make sure in their place you are putting your own settings. So if there is a default password that comes with a system, you want to make sure that you are updating that one to your own password. That is very, very essential. Leaving systems to be running on default password just opens you up to vulnerability. Also, you want to remove all the vendor access. So the vendor that configured the systems will probably still have access when they turn it over to you, but as soon as you take ownership of that application or that asset, you want to remove all the vendor access and then put your own access there. Those are very, very, very important. And the other thing is making sure that you remove all unnecessary connection, unnecessary items that are in that application. So if you are not using certain modules, if you don't need them, if you don't need parts, if you don't need certain configuration, then you shouldn't just leave them lying down there, because those modules and configuration that you're not using will be forgotten. People will not go there again, and then they become a very good source of attack by threat actors, because they can go there and you're not looking, and then they can just be doing their thing silently, moving laterally within your application without you ever knowing, because you are not opening those modules or application anymore. So whatever that you're not using in your system, you want to make sure that you are removing all those unnecessary items. Now, once you've done this, at least this will help you to a certain level within your organization to make sure that you are reducing your risk level. Then the next thing you want to do is, when you want to go into your risk assessment. Risk assessment, starts with just understanding. The first thing you want to do is, no matter what you are doing a risk assessment on, maybe you are doing a risk assessment on cloud infrastructure, you are doing a risk assessment for web application, you are doing a risk assessment for a web server, whatever. You first want to understand, the scope of that application. How many other applications is this one application touching? How many ports, how many point of call do you have within that application? What database is that application connected to? What type of, transfer, data transfer, data movement is that you have on that very system. You want to just have a very good high level understanding of the scope of that application. Now, when you can get this by talking to the business owner, you can get this by talking to application owners, developers in your environment, and they'll be able to, some are even very good, they will give you what we call a process flow of that application, which might be a diagram so that you can actually connect all the dots and understand fully the scope of that application. Once you understand that, then you want to make sure that you identify where threats can come up, where you can have what type of threat it can be lurking within that application. You want to make sure that you do your risk analysis in that way. You're looking at what type of threat is this application open to? Is it going to be an application that is susceptible to DOS attack? Is it a database application that is open to like a SQL injection attack? Is it an application that is running on the web server or web client or on the browser? Client browser, and then you looking at maybe an attack like a brute force attack, or you're looking at, based on what the application, based on the scope, will determine what type of threat the application might be open to. So once you determine that, once we understand those threats that application can be open to, then you want to go ahead and do what we call your likelihood and impact, your likelihood of that threat being carried out. And if that threat is exploited, if that threat become materialized, what is it going to affect? What is the impact? Is the impact high? Is the impact medium? Or is the impact low? Is it falling within the risk tolerance of the organization? So you want to make sure that you really get down that, identified. There are several applications out there that help you even score your risk level. And you can also use, framework like NIST and ISO ISO 27001, 27018. You can use NIST framework 800, NIST 800, and make sure that you look at the advisory guide from this framework to determine that likelihood and impact. Now, once you understand the likelihood and impact to the business, then you can begin to say, okay, I want to prioritize these, threats. We want to do what we call prioritization, because you must understand that as a business, as an organization, resources are always scarce, and you want to make sure that you are dealing with the most, high visibility or high impact area of your risk assessment. And once you deal with that one, then you can continue to go down the line or put compensative controls for the other ones. So we are looking at that, and you're making your decision, right? And then once that is done, you've identified, you now know, you've done your risk analysis in that way. You've seen the likelihood and impact. You understand what will the impact be, and then you've done your prioritization. Now, what you want to do is make sure that you put controls in place. So you want to work with, at this point, you want to make sure that you're working with maybe your development team, your product team, your security team, to make sure that we implement the right controls. So you work with them as they continue to put that control in place. You are also looking at, when you are doing your impact and likelihood, you are also looking at timeline. How long will that take for you to actually address and arrest that threat? And then you're looking at the impact to the business, and that is what you're going to use to actually categorize your criticality, and your criticality will inform your timeline so that you are dealing with it. For high visible threat that has also high impact, then you want to make sure between 0 day to 30 days you're trying to take care of that. You are working holistically with all your application teams to make sure that you quickly address that before such threat is exploited by threat actors. Also, once you put your controls in place, once you execute it, let's say, one of the controls is we need to have a strong password policy. We need to move to a multi-factor authentication system, so that the system is more secured. Or you want to make sure, or you want to say, okay, what we found out is that there are a lot of escalated privilege within this application, and we want to configure a role-based access. Then you look at the configuration of that role-based access, and then you make sure that you guys put the right control, the right configuration. Because even when you develop your controls and you configure your controls wrongly, or there is a fault or problem with that configuration, it could also become something that an attacker can exploit. So you want to make sure that you are looking at all these things holistically. And then once you execute your controls, you want to make sure that you're not stopping there. You are also monitoring those controls, and then you are documenting from how you started when you first did your scoping, you did your identification, you did your data classification, identification of threats, you did your impact and likelihood, you did your prioritization, you implement. You want to make sure that you are documenting all these stages so that there can be a scalability of that process in the future. So, and then you want to communicate that to your stakeholders and everybody that is concerned within the network or the organization. so that everybody understand why we took that decision, and if we did not arrest that situation, what could be. So that is how you go about doing your risk analysis. I know I kind of said it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, but it does take a little bit more. You have to work with people, you have to have that soft skill, you have to have meetings with business owners, you have to understand the system that you are trying to protect, you have to understand the data that you're trying to protect. You are making sure that you have that data classification really locked down. Those are the things that will help you to have a robust risk analysis in any organization and in any system. All right, guys, that is it. I know if you have any question, you can drop it in your comment. Again, my name is Michael Akimbamiro. Thanks for watching this channel, and we'll continue to do this series. I know I promised to be bringing, this topic one by one, and we'll run through it together so that you understand it from a point of view of somebody that is actually doing the work, rather than all these theories that is just floating out there. However, you still need to understand the theoretical aspect, so you need to be reading more, you need to go and do certain research, understand type of risk, understand type of threats, understand when they apply, what kind of threat can we find in a network, what kind of threat can you find in a database, what threat can you find in a web browser. Understanding those things will help you to have the full understanding of the big picture. All right, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next class.